We are glad to welcome you to this aspect of our training. We will be looking at learning and learning styles. Why is it important to look at learning styles? Because learning styles are the route through which each individual assimilates and retains information. Every learner has a couple of learning styles that makes it easier for him to assimilate information and put them to use or retain the information. For a teacher to understand the learning styles that are available in the class, that is, individuals and their learning styles in the class, the teacher will present material and content in such a way that will appeal to each of these individuals within the class, and so he can help them to retain information. Recent study, however, has indicated that the issue of learning styles are simply as a concept. That is because survey that have been done recently has proved that people do not always perform creditably if given assessment based on their preferred learning style. For instance, some survey was conducted where some individuals who were described as specific learning styles were taught and given some evaluation based on these learning styles, and the result of the assessment did not show that they performed creditably because they were simply assessed based on the route of learning or their learning styles. However, it still works very prominently that teachers will understand what routes the students or learners prefer to learn. That means what the learning styles of each individual in their class is. And so we can present the materials to appeal to each of these individuals in their learning styles, and so help them to retain the information that has been delivered by means in the content description. And so we'll be spending some time in this video to examine some of the learning styles and how teachers can take advantage of these learning styles to deliver content and help the learner to retain the information and develop valuable skills. We will start by understanding what the concept of learning is. What is learning? Learning can be seen as a process of acquiring new understanding, knowledge, skills, behaviors, and then using these in solving immediate real-life problems or problems within the society. That means that a person can learn when he's exposed to certain experiences. It can be negative, it can be positive. Sometimes a person learns even without knowing that he is actually doing so. That is to say, if a person is influenced by the things he hears, sees, and experiences, he's actually learning. He would have been motivated, and his feelings may have been expressed in the way he reacts to the things that he is seeing. That is why there is often the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor domains of learning, where a person will experience, feel, and then express the things that he has perceived within the environment. Such is actually learning. Learning is usually not positive, especially depending on the source of information that the person receives. If a person receives a negative influence, the person will act negatively. That means he can acquire negative inputs that can also become negative when he is reacting within the society. And so, basically, we want to understand that when a person acquires new understanding, when he acquires new skills, when he acquires new knowledge and behaviors, including attitudes, the person is seen to have learned, because all these are acquired within the circumstance of the environment that the person finds himself. And so, at this point, let us proceed by examining these learning styles and see how they can be individuals who who learn preferably by means of these learning styles can be assisted to develop skill and retain information that they have acquired. We'll begin with examining the visual or spatial learning. The visual or spatial learning, the learner in this style requires the use of aids, especially visual aids, images, diagrams, graphs to retain information and analyze information. And so when information is presented in the channel of visuals, the person who learns by means of the visual style will appreciably understand, retain, and then analyze such content, and then develop skill that is needed or that is sponsored by means of this of the content. And so how can a teacher develop a learner who learns by means of the visual aid? How can he help a learner by means of this learning style to understand and retain vital content that is delivered? So to do that, there are some suggestions that we will profile. Now, the first is that the teacher will need to include graphs and photos in his presentation. He can also use slides in his presentation. By doing so, he will appeal to the sight of the individuals who are of the learning style of the visuals. And so by another way he can do so is not to cluster the images with text. You should also use charts, maps, diagrams, and timelines in dispensing his content. You want to replace words with colors and images, and then you need to highlight important points. Instead of using text, you will highlight important points using colors and timelines. That is the visuals, and that is how a teacher can take advantage of the visuals to drive the content to a learner who relies on visuals for proper understanding and analysis. The second we want to take is the linguistic or verbal learning style. The linguistic or verbal learning style, the learner here requires reading, writing, listening, and speaking to retain valuable information. This is very essential. And so, how can a teacher exploit this in facilitating learning? He often wants to use summary. After presenting the content of a material, he wants to highlight that by summarizing into brief points. We also want to create handouts summarizing points that the content has described. We want to list out key points by means of slides and use acronym or mnemonics. That means if a series of items are listed, perhaps like factors or importance of certain contents, then he would need to use the acronyms, the first letter of each of these importance, to address the material as a summary, and that will help the learner. When he looks at the acronyms or mnemonics, he will understand and then retain vital information. We also need to separate the audience into groups and then allow them to interact with one another through discussion so that they can retain information and they analyze the information they have acquired. And so this can be, teacher can use this method in helping a person who has a linguistic learning style to retain vital information and analyze content. We look at the physical or kinesthetic learning style. The physical or kinesthetic learning style. Now, what do we mean by the physical? The person who learns by means of this learning style is one who accepts hands-on or wants to physically touch objects, do things physically so as to retain information. It will require hands-on, it will require cards, it will require flyers, it will require blocks, it will require things that they can physically touch and manipulate. Things that he can touch and manipulate. By the time he's able to touch things and manipulate them, he's able to retain what he's learning by means of these actions. So his impulses and the neurons, nerves, transport information based on what he can feel and touch. And so the message that is signals that are sent to his memory can actually be retained over time, and then information can be greatly analyzed and interpreted. So how can a teacher take advantage of these and help the learner to retain vital information and analyze key points? He can do so by providing them with hands-on, by making individuals to play key roles in a set of actions that describe the content, and then he can demonstrate or dramatize the lesson. He can provide step-by-step learner participation activities. He can give out open-ended questionnaires and then incorporate games into his deliveries. That is about the physical learning style. Now let's look at those ones who learn by means of the logical or mathematical learning style. This requires calculating things, categorizing them, and doing logical thinking to retain information. People in this are good in the sciences and in mathematics. So now, how can a teacher take advantage of this form of teaching, this learning style, to convey information, content, and help the learner to retain vital information? In doing so, it is important that he always expresses his ideas in concrete terms. You need to express ideas in concrete terms. Many learners using this style can easily respond to patterns and understand relationship between numbers. They prefer to categorize information into groups and look at it from that point of view. So to help a person retain information who learns by means of this learning style, you need to share key concepts behind lesson instead of fun facts. You also need to give them specific goals that will be achieved at the end of each lesson, and then we need to share how the process of the content relate to one another. We need to stress how content can also be used in solving problems within the classroom or outside the classroom. We also want to look at auditory or learning style. For many, listening to music involves studying or working on a task that can, for many, listening to music while working on a task can serve as a huge distraction. But those ones who are from this learning style enjoy music at the background when they are doing a particular task or an activity. They enjoy music at the background. And so to help them to retain vital information when content is delivered, the teacher will need to hold discussions and debates, speak clearly so that lessons are not just heard, but their concepts are distinguished. And then these are also assessed according to context. And then you also need to, from time to time, to do some music, start classes with rhymes, introduce music, dancing within the class environment to spur these ones up and help them to concentrate in the content that is delivered. Also need to create jingles, provide jingles in delivering lessons. So this is auditory learning style. Auditory learning style, and these are some of the areas where the teacher can help the person to understand. Now, naturalistic learning style requires that the person learns outside the class environment, especially in a natural setting with beautiful scenery, flowers, good natural background. People appreciate these learners appreciate content provided them through natural processes, and that means that they are always very good in natural sciences. And so how can a teacher exploit those who love learning in such an environment to help them retain vital information? We should connect them with the natural world by means of regular lessons outside the classroom. We should also choose beautiful sceneries occasionally, so where lessons are delivered out of class in beautiful sceneries. And then we need to explain how their topics that are being taught are observed in the real world, and then work one-on-one with each of the learners outside the classroom environment, get good settings and natural environments where certain contents, especially those that relates to nature, can be enunciated. By doing so, it will help the learner to focus on the content while relating into that pathway that he preferably learns and understands. We also want to take the interpersonal learning style. People in this learning style perform best when they are able to relate with one another and interact with others. They are social agents. They are much better reading emotions and facial expressions and are usually extroverts. To help them retain what is learned and understand better, the teacher will need to break his audience into groups. He needs to play the audience or his learners, with each learner demonstrating certain aspects of the processes that are involved in the content that he is delivering. He should also allow the learners to ask questions and allow others to attempt to answer the questions that some of the learners may have raised within the class. And then we also need to do peer teaching, allow learners to teach other learners, then offer one-on-one time with each of his learners. In doing so, we can help those who have this approach of learning to do well in understanding content that is delivered within the classroom. And then we have intrapersonal learning style. Those in this learning style are those who are introverted. This type of learners tend to be more introverted, and so teachers should recognize them and then prefer to learn and analyze concepts on their own rather than mix up with a group or do a group project. They are very independent and prefer positions without direct leadership or supervision. To assist them, the teacher will need to make group activities, not need to make group activities compulsory or optional procedure in class, or less frequent for these persons. And then we also need to make it flexible such that while others are involved in group activity within the same period, those ones who prefer to study on their own can be given their personal activity while others are engaged in groups. Then we also need hands-on with note summary, and then put together individual flyers, charts, and hands-on, provide individual with study guides. And so by doing so, we can help this learner learn by means of intrapersonal learning style to understand and analyze content and then retain information that is delivered. And so we have spent some time addressing about 8 learning styles: the visual and spatial learning style that requires visual aids, images, diagrams, graphs to retain information. The second we discussed was linguistic or verbal learning style, where the learner requires reading, writing, listening, and speaking to retain information. The naturalistic learning style, where the learner prefers to learn in a natural environment, observing nature and its content. And then kinesthetic or physical learning style, that the learner requires that he needs to physically feel, touch, manipulate objects to enhance his or her learning. And then we have the logical or mathematical learning style, we see the person requires categorizing things and then logically thinking and manipulating concept by logical thinking for him to retain and make practical application. Then intrapersonal or solitary learning style, which here the person prefers to learn alone, rarely wants to learn within a group, and so he has to be pressured into group activities. So the teacher needs to understand and then assist such ones also. And then we have interpersonal. This is the opposite of intra, and here we say those in this learning style are extroverts. They always want to socialize, like group activities, and so they always want to do certain activities in class in collaboration with others. Then lastly, the auditory or musical. And so those in this learning style require music or reading to comprehend and retain and apply information. And so why are this important for a teacher? We understand that all these learning styles, many persons relate to more than one at a time. Many learners relate to more than one of these learning styles at a time. It doesn't mean that for all the lifetime of a learner, he is focused on one particular learning style. No. At some point, he may juggle from one learning style to another learning style depending on the circumstance, depending on the material that is presented, depending on the approach the teacher is using. And you also have a class that is diverse. We have diverse individuals in the class with different backgrounds. And so with these diverse individuals, it is possible that everybody in the class does not have the same learning style at each particular point. And that means that a teacher needs to vary his approach depending on the content he's delivering. He needs to put up a couple of learning approaches, methods that will help to convey his content to meet the needs of virtually everybody that is in the class. And so at some point he needs to dramatize, at some point he needs to use music, at some point he needs to ask people to do some short writing, at some point he needs to bring out flyers and display them, at some point he needs to use visual aids. And so for each period of content delivery, a teacher who is diverse will need to employ the approach of virtually all or almost all of these learning styles, so that for each individual who is in the class, it will meet the needs of that individual. It is also important for teachers to come to know and appreciate the learning styles of each and every learner in the class, so that while he is using a particular approach, he has an objective in mind, he has a target audience. His intention is to cover a particular audience or learners in the class. And while he adopts another approach in the next level of his content delivery, he also has another audience in mind, another group of learners in mind. And so at the close of a particular lesson period, a teacher would have employed virtually all of these learning approaches so that he can reach virtually all of those who are in class. And he should listen to observations, listen to reactions, and whenever possible, he needs to change his approach, his style of learning to appeal to those ones who are yet to be carried along. By doing so, it will be able for him to achieve the basic objective of ensuring that the content is delivered to the understanding and the needed skill is cultivated by all the learners that are in his class. Thank you very much for listening to this part of our delivery. We hope to see you next time again as we take another part of our training. We continue to empower you teachers as we give you more and more training to make you more proficient and efficient in your tasks as teachers. To reach us, you can email us at itwhite@aol.com or call our mobile number 081-3480-8156. Thank you so much for listening to this. We'll see you next time.